what is groupthink, and how does groupthink happen, and where do you observe it, and what creates it? Just tell me a little bit about that, your thoughts around that.
Enter the Freud.
This podcast is for entertainment only and not intended for medical purposes.
But here's what's really fascinating. As much as it's really important to show that you align with other people, it's just as important, or maybe even more important, to show that you do not align with the other bad people. And that's something,
totally.
Like, no one really talks about that. They're much more focused on, oh, it's this coercive thing from inside the group, and they're trying to make you believe in their stupid ideas, right?
Yep.
Oh, you have to wear a special hat with a tassel that twirls, and that's the thing, right? And it's like, yeah, you do that, but more importantly, you have to point out how bad all the others are. And if you go out there, that will be your demise. You will die and live alone and have no love in your life, and you will end up somehow psychotic and feasted upon by the demons, and you'll become a prostitute. I'm serious.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that and I think there's something, again, like Darwinian about that, is like that human psychology really recruits a lot of strength around finding an enemy and hating the enemy.
Once you become involved in a group, you individually and or with your friends will come up with a new narrative. And you'll oftentimes actually start to describe how your previous life before the cult was so sick and disturbed as you were part of the other.
It's the group forms around like the us versus them, that those are the enemies, those are the bad people, and they live in a bad place, and you have to stay with this group or else you'll end up there with those bad, horrible people. And so it's this us versus them mentality, which is probably just an old animalistic primal survival thing about how, if a baby fish swam too far away from their school of fish, a shark would eat it. And so teaching all the baby fish in your school of fish to have groupthink around stay with our group of fish, don't venture outside it because the shark will eat you, like it worked pretty well for survival. And it's probably just a remnant of that level of thinking.
Yeah, okay.
And then the other part you said, which is more what you started off with, is it gives us a sense of meaning and a sense of identity and a sense of direction in life.
Well, if you were a part of multiple groups, that might help you maintain a level of equilibrium, right? Like if you had allegiance to several, because each group would have its own consensus reality. Mm-hmm. But then if the groups, like Venn diagrams, overlapped enough, there would be this larger consensus reality that would hold you into a place that was more agreed upon than not. And you wouldn't end up in some fringe Pluto orbit.
Yep. I think that's true. I think it's let me use the metaphor of all your eggs in one basket. I think that if you have all your eggs in one basket, you're in a much more precarious situation than if you have your eggs spread around in different baskets. And I think like the cult leaders or the ideological kind of like charismatic self-help guru leaders, I think they prey upon people who don't already identify with groups and who are kind of sort of lonely, both personally lonely, but also lonely in terms of sense of identity or community or connectedness. They're kind of, and those ones are quick to jump into the cult and put all their eggs in the basket. Whereas if you have if your eggs are already safely spread out among lots of baskets, I think that you're probably not as vulnerable to getting sucked deeply into one of these more extreme cults.
Yeah, so at least we're offering some kind of or we're pointing in a direction of like, hey, wait, this isn't all just catastrophe. That you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you believe in one thing, then you end up in a cult mentality. But if you don't believe in it, well, then you're out there adrift and ready to then end up in a group psychosis.
Yeah.
Right?
And so if we kind of go with what we're saying, it's almost like an antidote to the current intense ideological thing is if you and I form a mountain biking club and we have a friend who's getting pretty culty with whatever it is, and we invite him to come mountain bike with us 2 times a week, and he joins this community, then that maybe would start to reduce his culty thing that he's gotten into. And that does kind of seem right to me.
Right. So that's a really good example of how really what we're talking about is just like the need for social conformity and how susceptible we all are to social conformity, and the illusion that today we're being ruled by these insidious cults led by gurus and or these larger than life personality types. It turns out that no, there's not much of that going on, and for some reason you see people in your own lives where they've really started to identify with stranger and stranger conspiracy type theories, or just like hyper religious identification where previously they weren't religious, or I don't know what other kinds of like putting all your eggs in one basket examples, or if we even need any more, because
it's sort of like the eggs in the basket is almost like either meaning in life or communities that you identify with or sources of safety and connection and like self-esteem fulfillment.
How would we continue this metaphor of or the example that you gave, where if you have somebody who you care about, like it's your brother or your sister or your child, and you see that they're gravitating towards something that looks really problematic, like they may really disrupt their lives if they continue with this type of thinking, and then it's like, well, first of all, is it your job to go and interrupt that? And can you even do that? Right?
Yeah. Well, I do have a knee-jerk reaction is that what most people are drawn to do is to go argue with them ideologically, and that's probably one of the least helpful interventions.
Yeah, right.
Whereas to invite them to go mountain biking with you every Saturday is causally it doesn't make sense, but it actually seems to me like a much more helpful intervention.
And that's as we're assuming, because then they may still have some kind of like questions about the future of American life and society in general, and whatever these strange cultural phenomenon that is happening. But then they also have this kind of like grounded, hey, this is the group that I'm part of on Saturdays, and what we do is pretty easily definable, right?
Yes.
What we focus on is like whether you have a hardtail mountain bike or full suspension, and then whether we do downhill at a ski resort in the summer, or do we ride these tricky trails that have like what, like that's an easy thing to navigate. Well, the fact that your bike tires must remain on the trail is the simplest type of navigation, right?
Yep.
Like there's a path, and you can ride that path, or if you're really, really good, you can go off the path and jump off this rock and kind of like it's a strange. There's no way we could have. I didn't expect to end up in this territory, because when it came time for a solution to this, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know.
No, and I still don't know what to do, but I do think this is a good idea. So let's say I have a cousin who's gone off the deep end about some ideological thing, which I do have a bunch of family members who have. And sometimes I've tried to like argue with them, and that's is not helpful at all.
Right.
But I think that if I were to invite him mountain biking, like that would be good. And or whatever it is. If he was interested in woodworking, I could be like, oh, there's this cool new wood shop in town and you can join and then you can go use the wood shop once a week. Like let's go build some tables together or what, and you just start doing that thing. That does feel hopeful to me.
Yeah, absolutely. But so imagine that, like, what, because look, I run into this problem all the time with people who are trying to like meet friends once they're 30 years old, or they're a couple and they want to meet other couples to hang out with. And that is such a big challenge in our society today. It's so
Totally.
strange. Even if they're very likable people and they meet other people and they live not only in an individual house, they already live in a building with a bunch of other couples.
Yep.
It's still weird to, while they're hanging out with a couple in the gym or they're barbecuing with them, to even suggest that maybe we should hang out again feels
Yep.
weird.
Totally.
It feels totally weird unless you have an amazing skill to then kind of like, it's almost like if you had a third party intervention, a third group to say like, hey, here we are, look at, there's this other thing going on, we could do that. It's like, it's almost like a buffer from, hey, we're lonely, you're lonely, let's hang out. That's too creepy. I don't know why that is. Like,
it's a important question because it is too creepy, and it's so stupid that it's too creepy because you're right. Everyone above the age of 30, and maybe even especially above the age of 40 and 50, people are like desperately looking for new friends that just have through the stages in life, your interests change, and now you want to meet new friends that share your new perspectives or whatever, and it's like impossible to meet those people.
It's so crazy. Like, with all the use of apps to kind of like try to find people that you should go out with and date, it's like, I don't know why there isn't some kind of an app that would help you, like, but because if it just helped you figure out what you think and then pair you up with other people who think like that, maybe that's not even helpful. It's almost like, as we're exploring here, it's like there's an intelligence to finding out, okay, here's what we have in common. Well, here's a distant third thing that would drag both of us out of our secure, almost like these, our avoidant realities that we've hardened around, right? And because we have to break out of that thing before we can join into something else, right?
Yep.
So it's so strange. Now here we are in a conversation where we're talking about how to personally break out of your own cult of isolation. I think that may be the biggest fucked up cult that exists today, is like, do not join anything and stay,
I think that's true,
securely in your own hardened reality, which then becomes actually very, very similar to a slight case of agoraphobia.
It's totally true, and it's totally related to this bigger thing we've been talking about. I think that's what you just said is why people are so easily seduced into the TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, CNN, Fox News cult.
Right. So why do you see that, okay, if you've hardened your physical reality to be that you go to your house and then you go to your job and you don't venture much out of that other than to pick up food to take home, go to the gas station. Of course, COVID made this significantly more pronounced, but like how do you see that reality makes it so that you're then more susceptible to, I just want you to articulate it because it may be obvious, but why do you then end up with social media or CNN-isms?
Yeah, because I think we've already laid out all the dots, and we just have to connect them here. That this isolating thing that has definitely happened in the past 10, 20 years, where increasingly we've gotten so individualistic and so specialized in like, oh, I'm really into coffee and I'm really into intersectional feminism, and I'm really into mountain biking, and I won't hang out with anyone who's not into those same things. I don't want to talk to anyone. And that basically reduces me to having no friends.
Yeah, right.
So we've gotten so individualistic that then we just sit at home in our apartments and watch YouTube videos and look at TikToks, and we can find just the ones that kind of like vibe with us. So we're super isolated, and
man.
therefore we don't have our eggs in a lot of baskets. We don't have communities. We're all alone with our pile of eggs right here like this. And then a certain TikTok or a certain CNN thing or a certain YouTube video is like, yeah, that's my thing, and then we like get sucked in hook, line, and sinker to that ideological thing.
Dude, that's absolutely, that's really our dilemma, right? It's so strange. We had to wander around through a lot of territory to get here. But so in your story, when you're saying that we've got all these eggs right here, what are the eggs? What are they? It's almost like, because this goes to the individual potential.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's like sources of like self-esteem. Like normally if you have a crew of mountain bikers and a crew of people you work with and your family you're hanging out with and your wife and your kids, you have all these sources of little communities that kind of, you get self-esteem in a sense that you're a good person, in a sense that you have a community from all these places. But if you're just sitting around in your apartment by yourself, you have, we humans were so dependent on interpersonal social like feeding of us, and if you don't have it, the eggs are like the little parts of you that need to be fed or need to be affirmed, and you don't have anyone to like help you with that or something.
Yeah. Okay, so if that was the case, then it's almost like we're now pointing to what an individual self is. What does it need? And I think that's probably something that isn't talked about enough. It's just
I agree.
Like what is really important for all of us, and then how would we design that? Because I really think what we could do as a trajectory from this conversation is to start to outline how it is we help people that come in to psychotherapy with this problem, various forms of this problem, and then how is it that they, with their own intelligence, kind of come up with solutions for the various distribution of how much they have become an isolated person who has senses of themselves that aren't being affirmed through the multiple channels that would be healthy.
Yep, totally.